right?
Yeah.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. So the Central Kootenay Invasive Species Society, or CKISS, is a non-profit environmental organization. Our mission is to protect ecosystems and communities by preventing and reducing the harmful impacts of invasive species, and we have been around since 2005. We work within the regional district of Central Kootenay and Kootenay boundary areas A and B. Organization, we work with many stakeholders, everybody, including community groups and the public. Okay, hold on. Oh, this is all very confusing. Okay, here we go. So just a very quick overview on what are invasives. An invasive species is an organism that causes ecological or economic harm in a new environment where it is not native. So basically it's coming outside of its natural range. It's being transported by cargo ships, planes, people, horticulture. A lot of our plant species actually come from Eurasia and Asia. Some common traits of invasive species. Number one is they are dispersed initially and primarily by human activity, and they spread very easily. And this is very important because we are the primary movers of invasive species. So there are a ton of behavior change programs, as you can see on the screen, related to trying to prevent the movement of species, because that is by far the easiest. Eradication is extremely costly. We should be all familiar with this graph by now from the news and the coronavirus. So invasive species show exponential growth due to high fecundity, so a lot of babies basically, and lack of predator control. And normally we tend to notice species when they're at the very top of the graph where they have already exploded, unfortunately, but we're trying to prevent things at the very beginning. And the third most important trait for invasive species is that they cause harm. They cause harm to the environment, the economy, or health. So they are one of the greatest threats to biodiversity across the world, and they alter habitats and disrupt essential ecosystem functions. Once established, they can reduce soil productivity and result in a loss of traditional food and medicinal plants, native plants. They affect recreational opportunities. If you've ever tried to swim in a lake with milfoil, you would understand what I'm talking about. And in addition, they have impacts on forestry and agricultural operations by competing with the agricultural species. And we're also trying to keep mussels out of our lakes because they attach to infrastructure. Oops, I see that someone else also is presenting. Do I need to stop and start over again? Resume your presentation.
Unfortunately, yes. I'm not sure why people keep presenting, but please stop doing that. Oh, you've got a, here, yeah, it's fine. It's working.
Okay, great. It's okay, Zoom is also having massive problems, so one isn't better than the other. I'm just going to quickly go over a little bit about the term invasives because it can be confusing. So we have invasive traits, and those can be exhibited in native and non-native plants, and that is vigorous growth, fast growth, high fecundity, producing lots of seeds, lots of rhizomes, but that can occur in either. And for example, sorry, on that last screen I had snowberry. If you've ever had snowberry in your yard, you would know what I mean. Also, we have non-native or alien plants that are naturalized, but they can either be harmful or not harmful. So tomatoes would be a not harmful species. Harmful would be a knotweed species. And then we have invasive plants. This is puncture vine. And so they are not native, and they have invasive traits, and they are harmful. So other words that we might hear are weeds, alien plants, noxious, but not all alien plants are harmful, and not all weeds are invasive because they don't also necessarily cause harm. So like a dandelion would be a weed, but it's not an invasive. So we are talking about a very specific subset of plants here. So what if we could prevent the next knotweed? And there was a really great research paper that came out in 2018 by Gu et al. And they found that 94% of the 1,700 naturalized plants that exist across the world were actually cultivated in domestic gardens. So a naturalized plant is one that has become established and outside of its native range. So basically, horticulture is recognized as the main pathway of plant invasions worldwide. And the selection of ornamental garden plants is not random. It prefers or promotes certain plant characteristics that are related to adaptive plant strategies that may promote invasion. So horticulture is a massive pathway. So we're always going to be moving plants. We always have, we always will be moving plants. And so it's important that we know what we grow. So after explaining how the horticulture industry is such an important pathway, there was actually no law in BC that regulates the sale of noxious invasive plants. So it is up to us as landowners to be aware of the plants that we are buying and planting. What we do have is the Weed Control Act. And under this act, landowners are legally responsible for controlling certain noxious weeds, that's their terminology, on their property. And there is a schedule attached to this act that lists the species, but we also roll those species into our own regional priority lists that we update every year. So very importantly, identify the plants that you have in your garden or that are in the nursery. And there's a few ways of doing that. Google Photos is an excellent app. iNaturalist is also an amazing app that has a bunch of ecologists and plant biologists that will also help review any entries that are not easily diagnosed by the app itself. And then there is the Invasive Species Council of BC. They have a ton of tip sheets on different plants. And then we have this little field guide for noxious weeds. And then we have the PlantWise program, which inspired this presentation. And this is aimed at the horticultural industry, but they also have a bunch of resources for landowners. And I'm going to go through those briefly later. So share with care. Do not share invasives. This is really important and happens very often and probably by accident. So be very careful when you are taking something from your friend's garden. Do not pick or transplant plants from rows, especially. If you see any plant, Terry, Joe, Henry, I think that you're not needed. Could be Terry? Can you, Terry, Joe, Henry? I see that. So do not take plants from disturbed areas because they are more than likely to be invasive. And you also shouldn't be digging out native plants from undisturbed areas either. And then check your species, as I went over in the last slide, with the various methods. So if you don't know it, still control it. Consider deadheading any plants before they set seed and spread. Replace fast spreaders before they take over your garden. Do it quickly because they move quite quickly. Or you can cover with cardboard, that's my favorite, and mulch it. And if you are removing either plants or the seed heads, bag all the invasives, plant material in clear plastic bags. And then you can take these to any transfer or landfill station and dispose of them for free. And don't ever dump your weeds over the bank, especially hanging baskets. That's actually a really big problem is the plants that come in hanging baskets. So don't compost. Because a lot of the plant material will reproduce from fragments and seeds can last in a seed bank for decades. So the best method is really just dispose of this right to the transfer or landfill station. So dumping is illegal. You want to avoid the following things. Soil or mulch or gravel that is contaminated. And we actually have a case in Creston where blueweed is being spread from a gravel pit. So you do want to be very careful. Also, hay can contain weeds. So it's preferable to use straw, which is the stock of agriculture grains and tends to be weed-free. And also be very careful about moving soil from a neighbor's yard. All of these are things that have happened that we receive calls about, and people have moved invasive species that way. So be very careful. You want to avoid fast spreaders and vigorous self-seeders. So this is Virginia creeper. So you look it up and you go, oh, this seems like a really great plant. It's very hardy, it grows really fast. You want to be very careful about those plants because they are probably not native. And for example, Virginia creeper, it's native out east. And I thought, oh, that's a great plant. I'm familiar with that one. That one's native. No, it's not to this region. In fact, it's invasive in a lot of places in the state. So really check your plants. Also use caution with wildflower mixes. This blue weed was thought to have been brought over in a wildflower mix. It got introduced to the Christina Lake area and the Kootenays. It's now causing a big problem. Other species are hawkweed that we think came through wildflower mixes, baby's breath, oxeye daisies, Dame's rocket, and common tansy. So, for example, this Miracle Grow that you can find at Canadian Tire has like 22 species in it, and the other varieties that they have like 29 species in it, and they do not list them on the packaging that I can find. So we really want to avoid these. It's preferable to buy individual plants that you know and or get them from a local source like Kinseed, who we'll be talking later on. So we want to grow regionally native or non-invasive plants. And this is where the PlantWise Grow Me Instead resources came in, and you can get these resources from the website, or we have them physically in our office, or you can get an app, and that basically lists the priority invasive species and alternatives that you can grow for those species. And so I'm going to go through some of the species that are listed in there and some of our own regional plants. Some of the plants in the Grow Me Instead brochures are coastal, so just beware of that. I'm going to leave it up to you to look at these brochures and find more information about them. Just for the sake of time, we can't obviously go through everything. So I just want to show you some pictures of some common plants that you might see around in the woods or in your garden so that you do not transplant them. So the first one is Himalayan balsam, or policeman's helmet. I think it would be great to see policemen in pink helmets. But this one is riparian lover. It creates erosion on riverbanks. It's quite prolific. Yellow flag iris, very showy, very beautiful. People plant these in their ponds. I believe there's some in Blaylocks. But they form giant mats, and then the roots accumulate sediment, and they have these like big floating islands. And this is a really big problem in Creston in the wildlife management area. Huge headache. Please don't plant this one. There's lots of alternatives for this one. Knotweed, which is my favorite and is one of our biggest battles in this area. It's quite large. The picture on the right is the giant knotweed. There's the Himalayan and Japanese and Bohemian knotweed as well. Most often we see the Japanese knotweed around here. As you can see, it can grow up through concrete, asphalt, foundations, any cracks. So it is a problem when it comes to infrastructure. You don't want this next to your house or in your septic tank. This one is very unique in that you can't manually control it. You can try, but you will more than likely fail. It has a huge rhizome network. It can go up to 3 to 10 meters wide from the plant. So often you'll see it on one side of the road, and then you'll see new shoots coming up on the other side of the road. So we really want to get rid of this plant and control it in our region because it spreads so voraciously and it can reproduce from any fragment. So you don't want to disturb this one. If you aren't going to get rid of it, don't disturb it. And we recommend hiring a herbicide contractor for this one. There's been a zillion trials on this plant and nothing has worked besides herbicide. So get in contact with us if this is your issue. Himalayan blackberry. If you picked in these blackberries, you would not forget them. They have ginormous thorns. They have taken over the coast. If you've driven through Vancouver, they are in all the ditches. They are delicious, but there are thornless, great garden varieties. So do not transplant this one either. Scotch broom, very familiar sight on the North Shore, Kootenay Lake for sure. And notice that this picture has different color variants, which leads us to believe that even the so-called sterile variety of this invader is somehow exchanging pollen and escaping into the wild. So another one, it's very showy, but we don't want that one. Purple loosestrife, also another very beautiful plant. This one's often chosen for gardens with high moisture and for attracting bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. But once again, they do like wetlands, and this is important to like knotweed also likes riparian areas, and riparian areas are very high productive wildlife habitat, so we really don't want these species getting into that type of environment. Oh, this is a great one, Archangel. This one comes in hanging baskets. You may recognize those leaves. And it gets spread when people dump their hanging baskets. I have a huge patch near my house. It just covers the ground, as you can see. Oh, did I go over, did I mess this up? A butterfly, oh yeah, sorry. Butterfly bush is another ornamental for butterflies. And there is a sterile variety, but you can't actually buy it. This is the problem with the horticultural industry. It's very complicated. It's all to do with marketing and commerce. So just avoid this one. We haven't had a lot of instances of it escaping the garden, but we're very concerned about it and we don't want it to become a problem. So please don't plant this one. You can buy butterfly bush at garden centers. Periwinkle, you can also buy at garden centers. It can tolerate shade to sun. It's a great ground cover, but that's what makes it such a problem. Yeah, this one's all over the coast as well as here. I have it in my garden. English ivy. This one is very hardy. You can buy this one as well in the garden centers, but it chokes out the ground. It chokes out trees. I believe they just removed this from the Nelson City Courthouse because it was breaking down the bricks. So this is not a plant you want anywhere on your property. Flowering rush. We have a couple instances of this one. We really want to keep this one out of our area. It was being sold at Canadian Tire, which is, we think, how it got into our region. So just to be aware of this one. If you see it, please tell us. So a couple of species on our regional watch list. We have a bunch of knapweeds. The spotted knapweed is the very common one that you have seen. It's toxic. Oh no, this one is not toxic, but it does compete with agricultural areas and rangelands. So it costs billions. We spend billions controlling this species. In BC, Horiolism is the one that is toxic. Again, this is an agricultural species. It appeared in my garden as well. Some other common ones are flat pea vine. You see those on the sides of the roads. The orange and yellow knapweed, which more than likely everyone has in their garden, and they tend to infest lawns. And if you mow them, they just grow shorter. So they're crazy to get rid of, have huge tap roots, but you can actually use a high nitrogen fertilizer to get rid of knapweed. So again, get in touch with us if you want more information on that one. And then baby's breath, this shows up in wildflower mixes and of course in flower arrangements. So this is causing a huge problems in these Kootenays. Pretty, but we don't want this one. Some other ones, bachelor buttons, those show up in wildflower mixes. The goutweed, bishop's weed, or snow in the mountain, that is everywhere. It seems to like growing with knotweed, actually. It's really quite invasive and hard to get rid of, and it does go into the forest. Comfrey is a medicinal plant, and so that was planted by the early settlers, I believe, in this area, and so we see that popping up all the time. And black locust, it is very, very hard to get rid of, so do not plant that one. So you can get involved on how to do that. You can use the Report a Weed app, or you can report a weed to us, or you can actually do it online. You can check out the PlantWise program, or you can stay informed with CKISS and become a member or one of our newsletter subscribers. And quick shout out to our funders, Province of BC with the Ministry of Forests, BC Gaming, and Columbia Trust. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will move over to our next presenter. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laurie. And I'm going to try sharing my screen. We'll see how we do in the entire screen.
Blue box.
Blue box.
Screen 2.
2. Hello. All right, are we getting there? I think we are there. Oops. Lost it. Okay, there, I think we're there. Can everyone see my screen? Good. I'm just going to assume that that's a yes. So I'm Valerie Huff, and this is Brenda Beckwith. She'll pop in later. Hello. And we're here today to talk to you about the wonders of our native plants and to suggest some ways that you can connect with these amazing beings. I'm trying to find my mouse. So I'm with the Kootenay Native Plant Society. We're a non-profit volunteer organization that advocates for native plant conservation in our region and connecting people, plants, and place. What exactly is a native plant? Laurie talked about what an invasive plant is, and there is intersection between an invasive and a native plant, but nativity is a strangely challenging question. And native plants are really a part of the more than human world. There's unique species, varieties, ecotypes that evolved in a particular region. And they co-evolved with other living things, including other plants, animals, including us, fungi, bacteria, in community. And personally, I find it really useful to start thinking of them as wild beings that they are and give them the same sort of consideration we give to other wildlife. So as an example of something that isn't a native plant, we have the glorious garden petunia. Now, I love petunias, and this is the photo from the petunias on our deck. So petunias and other non-natives have been domesticated. And they're super predictable and they're uniform. We know how to grow them on an industrial scale. We know how to fertilize them. We know how to produce them in mass quantities. They're readily available and they're cheap. Most importantly, for one thing, they're actually bred for our human tastes. We choose the colors, we change their shapes, we change their odors and their nectar qualities. We select for disease and insect resistance to prevent predation by insects. And so the fact that we have chosen how we want them to be is great for us. It allows us to grow a petunia on your balcony for the summer, and it's going to bloom the whole summer. But that's not really what native plants do. So a native plant is not a petunia. It's a wild being. It is unpredictable, and a lot of them are very unknown. You really can't find them at Canadian Tire. And unlike the cheap petunias that we can buy, I think of them as priceless. And because of the breeding for our taste, they're really not of the same value for pollinators and other wild beings that, that our native plants are. And this is a quote from the Xerces Society. And then the question of what is a native plant goes beyond just the species level. Laurie showed a picture of the wildflower package from Miracle Grow, and featured on that was, in fact, this plant. This is Coreopsis tinctoria, golden tick seed. If you look at the maps, it has a couple of variants that are genetically distinct and evolved in place. The common golden tick seed is not found in British Columbia. So you can see that there's this white area here. It's not found here. So it's actually a non-native to here. Whereas the Atkinson's tick seed, it's a little bit distinct, it's unique, and it is rare in British Columbia. So when we're considering what's native, we really have to get to know your local flora. You really have to know what you have and what's there. And consider that when we may actually harm our native wild forms with invasive genetics from other forms. So some of the reasons why you might want to grow native plants. First of all, let's consider the caterpillars. Okay? All of the more than 2,000 butterflies and moths in British Columbia go through a caterpillar phase. And caterpillars are super picky eaters, and they will often feed on only one species or genus of native plants. So if you want to conserve butterflies, you have to conserve native plants. Second reason to grow native is for our native bees. So honeybees, they get all the love and attention. And I love honey too, so no problem with that. But take a moment to think about the incredible diversity of our native bees. We have more than 500 species, and they have different lifestyles, flower preferences, and habitat requirements. Again, native bee conservation is native plant conservation. So just some examples of some of our beautiful bees. We've got a red nomad bee, a metallic green sweat bee, and a small ground nesting sweat bee. This particular plant, this particular bee in the corner here is called the globe mallow bee. And it specializes on our native wild mountain hollyhock and the listed scarlet globe mallow. So the only way to conserve this bee is to conserve that plant. So, and approximately a third of bee species are specialists on one particular plant, on one particular group of plants. Another reason to plant native is many of them are pollinators superfoods. Some native plants are more equal than others. These are ones that have exceptional nectar and pollen resources. And so this is a Douglas's aster, and watching it in the fall when it's in bloom is a bit like watching The Wild Kingdom on TV, because there's so many different visitors to that plant. And then there are some birds, and according to the Audubon Society, native plants are just plain better for birds. A lot of birds rely on those caterpillars that rely on specific native plants. So this is a chain it's a food chain that is supported at the ground level by native plants. Birds also eat seeds and fruits, and they drink nectar like this rufous hummingbird female is nectaring on this milkweed. And then there's us. So normally at this point I would probably bring up some partial truths about how native plants are adapted to local soil and weather conditions, so you can use less water, and you don't have to mow as often, and all of those things. And those are all, partially true. But for me, the real reason to bring native plants into your life is that they help us reconnect with the natural world out there. So this photo on the left is of us with the Kootenay Native Plant Society planting Camas back into Millennium Park with all the students from Twin Rivers School. And connecting the next generations with the natural world, with a plant that's been part of that landscape for millennia, is really why I do this. And in the words of the poet Mary Oliver, pay attention, be astonished, tell about it, which is really why I think we should be growing native plants. And that is the plants themselves. So plant conservation matters and plant diversity matters. And I really think that we can all contribute to conservation by connecting our yards and gardens to the wild beauty and creativity of our native plants. So, and at this point, I'm gonna pass the wand to Brenda. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. It's really weird talking to a screen and not seeing anybody, but I trust that you can all see me. And so today, many of you probably know my work with Kootenay Native Plant Society, but today I'm representing our new little company in Nelson, BC called Kinseed. And so we supply, it was skipped over at the beginning, native seeds, truly native ecotypic seeds for the West Kootenay, as well as plants, ecological gardening advice and consulting, as well as we do contract plant propagation, as well as seed collection. And so a little bit more about us a little bit later on. And so let's launch into this. So I'm going to continue on the same vein as Valerie, with a little bit of theory and a little bit more about native plants. But I want to start with a pyramid. And we often, when we think about these things, we think about building up. But I think I want you to get into the mindset of building a foundation, right? And that works really well because we're like building a foundation in the soil to support native plants, that support native pollinators, that support native bees, that support native birds, right? So on and so forth. So, and Lori, I'm gonna take your grow me instead, and I'm gonna change it to grow with me. And what I suggest is, let's start with knowing ecology, right? It's a good place to start, right? So at the top of the pyramid is this idea of ecological gardening. It's ecologically focused, geographically appropriate. It's about being open, it's being adaptive. It's also about being inquisitive and very, very careful as well. We like, with Kinseed, we call it rewilding, right? And it's perfectly okay. I know some of you are saying, hey, I just want some pretty flowers in my garden that might bring some bees. That's awesome. But what about if you can start building connections, right? And actually build a small ecosystem in your yard, what I lovingly call a habit patch. Like, what if you can do that, right? So by embracing some ecological gardening techniques, you can, in fact, in your yard, in a small space, build ecological function. You can build community relationships, bring ecosystem health. All right, you can do this. That little bitty pyramid right at the top can actually lead to sustaining biodiversity, as well as ecological resilience and maybe some connectivity. But maybe that's not quite enough. And I know, like, this is an eco-society webinar, and I think there's more that we can do here, people. And don't tell me you don't have enough time on your hands and a whole bunch of kids sitting on the couch, right? We can figure this out together. So think about this. Each person, each property can create spaces that have these natural elements. But what if we can connect them all together? All right? What if we can connect it to a conservation property? I'm sorry, I love the butterfly. What can I say? To a schoolyard, to the city park, to Leah, I saw you're on here. I put your garden in there. Leah's, right? And, you know, then we really start building connectivity, and we build in this resilience and this insurance within our local fragmented landscape, which would be super cool. So I like to think about ecology with a small e, not a large e, right? So I've gone to school a lot and I've learned about the science of ecology with a large E, but there's lots of ecologies for you to consider. And ecology is messy, but that's what makes it kind of complicated and fun. So what can you do? We can't, of course, we don't have time to get into this, but here's some things to consider, all right? Water, sunlight, soil conditions, just to name a few. For example, where does your water come from, right? And where does it go? Does it stay on your property for very long? Does it go through some of your property, but not other parts of your property, right? And seasons affect that too. Obviously, we get more water now than we do in August, right? So taking track of where your water is and how long it sticks around, it's a pretty good idea. Then you start thinking ecologically, how can I keep water in the system? How can I keep water here, right? Some of the things to think about. What about sunlight? Also, where does it come from, right? And how long does it last? And this is very important, like for those of us who live on the north side of the slope, maybe in winter we don't get a lot of direct sunlight, but those of you who are in Bonington, over on the other side of 6 miles, say, you're gonna be getting a lot more sun in the beginning part of the day and in different seasons. So again, things to think about. But also buildings on your property. Some of those buildings hold heat, but some of those buildings are nice and big and tall and block sunlight from hitting plants. So thinking about the ecology of your home space and work within that, right? What is your soil composition? Soil composition also affects soil water holding capacity. So those are all good things to think about too, right? Obviously gravelly soils tend to shed water, water moves through. Soil with more organics holds more moisture. One of the things briefly is, where do the soils come from? Do you have native soils, or did you build on a fill site? That's important because a lot of our native plants need those mycorrhizae relationships. They need that native soil in order to really, really thrive. So again, I know you probably got tons of questions just on the slide alone, but I just wanted to put that out there that there's some considerations. You could, yes, put some native plants in the garden, but you could do a little bit more and really gain the knowledge. So bringing them in, learning as you go, right? It's completely okay to make mistakes and to learn as you go and to learn from the plants. So, if you have an idea, if you want a meadow, go visit some meadows. We are blessed with being in this beautiful region of the world. We can go visit these places and learn from these places. What are they like? What is the moisture? What is the sunlight? What is the soil, right? Think about that. Can I duplicate that in my own yard? Make mistakes, just try. Just try. I tell students all the time, just show up, just try. Make mistakes, keep a garden journal, learn through the seasons, over the years, and build that knowledge. Take the time to know your ecological yard. Don't be hasty, don't rush, take it in small steps and in small spaces as well. And then link those spaces, build connectivity, can't even say the word, in small spaces, and then build it within your community. All right, I don't know about you, I think this stuff is super exciting. So embrace messy. I know that's a lot of, kind of a high bar for many of you who like control in your gardens, and your neighbors might not like that either. I understand, but try to embrace the messiness that is ecology, and let go of control. Put out the compost. Yeah, just try different things. I know Lori said not to compost, but compost is good. Plants are forgiving, and just keep that in mind. All plants, and notice how I don't have native plants in front of there. I think all plants are forgiving, and we need to get out of the mindset of bad plant, good plant, and say plants. Let's know plants. Let's know these friends, these beautiful botanical friends, and get to know them well, and learn from them. Limitations do abound. I know many of you are saying, hey, let's go out and get those native plants. And wouldn't that be great? They are very hard to come by. And this ecotypic, think of it as the genetic inheritance, right, of our local community. That's what we want to keep here. That's how we build in the resilience of the space where we live. So how do we do that? Well, attending a webinar is a good start. Connecting with Kootenay Native Plant Society and lots of events and activities that they have, connecting with local growers, such as Kinseed, a great way to start. Please, please, please do not take them from the wild. As Lori mentioned, right, moving things from the wild is dangerous. Don't take plants from the wild, period, just because they belong there. But, you know, when you do say, hey, I got a great idea, I'm going to go dig up this native plant from the wild, you're taking that resource away from that part of that ecosystem, the people, if you think of all beings as people, sure, the beings that need it, but also you don't know what's in that soil. You don't know what else you're bringing with that plant, and it's just ethically wrong. So don't take plants from the wild. Advocate for locally appropriate plants in our region. Advocate them in city council, advocate them in our schools, advocate them in our yards, advocate for them, you know, at our nurseries, at Ellison's, right? We should be having more native plants available, period, right? And we would love to build that community support. Create and connect a community of native plant enthusiasts. Let's connect. I know there's a few people on this webinar who we've already connected with. We miss you, and we'll be seeing you soon. But you know, share information, especially what went wrong, but also what you did about it, right? And then, because there's not a lot of native plants out there, let's figure out how to build, you know, maybe a micro nursery. Everybody has little micro nurseries. Maybe there are plants that we can share in a respectful and ethical way, right? That really honors the plants. So just some take-home messages, and then I'm going to show you lots of pretty flowers and pictures of plants. I know that's what you're waiting for. Hang on there. Native plants are amazing. They're talented. Yeah, they are. And they're vital for life. Trust me, native plants can do so many things you can't even dream about doing. So it is worth their respect and their time. And as Valerie outlined so beautifully, they're absolutely vital. They're foundational for life on this planet. And there's so many different crises going on in our world right now, and they layer and they layer and they layer and layer. This is an amazing, positive way to start building a foundation, that bottom part of the pyramid, that really can help us through the next little while and bring us joy as well, and that's important. Transform your home spaces in phases. I already talked about this. Take your time, start small. So think about scale, right? Think about what you can do. Don't worry about doing it big, do it well, right? Get the right plants, connect with them, even if they're tiny, and let them grow with you, and you grow with them, right? And you learn together. So learn from your plants. They are remarkable ecological teachers. I learn from them all the time. I've been learning from plants probably since I was a kid, and I know until the day I die, I'll still be learning their valuable lessons because they have a lot to teach. Plants are wonderful, hence the name of our presentation. So it's a whole lot perhaps to take in. Hopefully it's kind of raw and supportive and encouraging as well. That's what I want it to be, because it shouldn't be like, hey, I want these native plants and I can't get them. No, let's figure out, get the availability out there and get those native plants into our community. And how do we do that together? All right, I promised you 10. This is my top 10 native plants to adopt, at least for today, because I'm sure tomorrow it will change. All right, so let's start at, we're not going to go backwards. We're going to just start right at 1. They're not in any particular order. Okay, so I'm going to start, okay, it's not a plant, but it's plant category. Easy annuals. They're so easy to get going. They're prolific self-seeders. They can be, like this picture, an exceptional tangle of color and texture. And many of them can be really long bloomers in the garden as well. So the bluish, purplish one is the threadleaf Phacelia, and next to the pink fairies. And the pink fairies kind of looks like those, I don't know, it's like the fairies' leotards got caught in the dryer too long. I don't know, it's just, those are spectacular petals. Come on, you can't deny that. So annuals, some are really drought resistant. They work in shallow soils, some in rocky soils. They do quite well in nutrient poor soils, many of them. So really super easy, great place to start. All right, so let's go right into common yarrow number 2. Common yarrow is beautiful, umbrella-shaped clusters of these white flowers. Has really deeply divided fern-like leaves, really bringing interesting texture to the garden. Really can grow anywhere, and it does grow everywhere. And I'm sure many of you already know how important it is as a medicinal plant. In fact, I still have Shanoon Bennett from the Valley in my head talking so passionately about how great yarrow is, especially for women's health in particular. So a shout out to Shanoon. Thank you for putting you in my head and sharing that amazing knowledge with me. Nodding onion, so also super useful. All of the plant is edible, really yummy, by the way. Has these beautiful nodding pale pink flowers, like little pink lanterns. Grows really well in a rock garden, in a meadow, in a pot or a raised bed, as you can see in our nursery bed there. And it's just a really exceptional plant that has lots of different settings that it can really thrive in, and it's really lovely. A word of caution though, as an ethnobotanist, I have to do my honor. A lot of us go out and hike, right? We are hikers in the West Kootenay, and we say we come across something that we think is nodding onion. Do not snap it off and put it in your mouth, because we do have a lookalike plant out there called death Camas, and it does take after its name. So please, please, please be very, very careful and do not practice ethnobotany if you're not 100% sure you can identify the species. Remember, if it smells like an onion, it's probably an onion. Don't put it in your mouth. All right. All right, back to a category. Number 4, there are lots and lots of great shrub options. We have some great people who grow shrubs around, and like Gregoire also in the Valley, and his contact information is on the last slide. He has red osier dogwood, he has willow, the two bookending the shrubby penstemon there in the middle. Red osier dogwood, think about, if you want those flowers in there, that's great, like the shrubby penstemon, but think about, the beautiful reddish, purplish leaves that the red osier dogwood gets late in the fall. Gorgeous, right? Think about all the different textures and colors of the foliage that you can bring into your garden as well. It's awesome. Shrubby penstemon is just blooming its little heart out right now. It's so beautiful. It's buzz pollinated. If you saw Valerie's last amazing webinar, she talked about that. It's great in borders and rock gardens. And you wouldn't think willow, when I say willow, you're like, think, hey, yeah, there's a great garden plant that has striking flowers, it's beautiful. Well, look at it, it does. And it attracts butterflies and a lot of those early pollinators in March. There might be snow on the ground, but there are pollinators out there, and alder and willow are both super important for them. All right, Roundleaf Alumroot. This one I can't say enough about, all right? This one is like the drive-in movie of plants, right? So we all have time right now. So what I want you to do is get some alumroot, then you take your yard chair out there and you watch it. It's so much better than Netflix, trust me. There's so much activity on our heuchera right now, actually that one right there. That you can see growing in the pot. And that said, it can grow in a pot and grow in a rock garden and grow in meadow. It can grow in a border, just about anywhere. And it brings in this amazing texture of those leaves, those basal leaves that are flat along the soil, and these tall spires of creamy white flowers. It's just absolutely excellent. So if you want something better than Netflix, put Roundleaf Alumroot in your garden. It's great. And I could spend the next half an hour talking about this one. Common Camas, also known to our Sinaiacs friends as Black Camas or Iqua. Many of you probably already know of its great cultural significance, the bulbs in particular in the indigenous diet and economies of First Nations, wherever Camas grows largely. It also is a tremendously important ecological species. More than 30 species of pollinators have been recorded by botanists, that would be us, with Kootenay Plant Society. We call it a pollinator magnet. Many of these species I'm talking about are pollinator magnets, kind of like that heuchera I just showed you. It's also really important because it's an early bloomer in late April into May. So can you kind of see what I'm doing there? We got willow and alder and then camas, and then we're moving through the seasons because it's important to realize that these pollinators, they not only need plants in June or in August or in May, right? There's a whole suite of pollinators that need these plants for nectar and pollen throughout the season. And just another comment that these plants are special and many people consider them very sacred. Please don't poach them from the wild. Through our research, we have estimated there's probably less than 1% of the original Camas populations remaining in the West Kootenay. Let's leave them where they are. Work with us to enhance them, to restore them, and to expand them. That is a much better route to take. Okay, cool. All right, milkweed. So I should probably leave Valerie to talk about this one, but I'll do it. I'll try and do it justice. Showy milkweed is our only native milkweed, right? And it too is a pollinator magnet. Hundreds and hundreds of pollinators nectar on showy milkweed. I mean, look at these flowers, exceptional, unique flowers in shades of pink. Of course, it's the host plant for the monarch caterpillar. Without showy milkweed, right, there wouldn't be any monarchs, and we definitely all want to see monarchs return to the West Kootenay. And with the climate crisis, who knows, West Kootenay might be, and the Columbia Basin might be more and more important for monarchs at the northern end of their range. And so that's something to consider. Pearly everlasting, I love it, right? It forms, it's got this soft, velvety foliage. It forms this beautiful ground cover and has these white and yellow flowers there with a painted lady with cotton-like clusters that persist well into the fall. Sorry?
Someone's mic just went on by accident. Continue.
Okay. It's also really important, like milkweed, it's a mid to late season bloomer and really supports those pollinators that really need blooming times from August, September into October, into what Valerie calls the nectar desert of the summer. So those plants are really super important as well for the monarch on, it needs those foods before it starts its migration south. And here's just a few other examples of those late season bloomers that are so important. All right, that was number 8. Yes, that was another all, I can't add. All right, what can I say? I'm a botanist. All right, Silverleaf Phacelia, we have a friend and a colleague, bee taxonomist Lincoln Bess, who says if you put any plant in your garden, make it this one, Silverleaf Phacelia. In fact, he goes as far as to say he has a top 10 list of plants for pollinators, specifically bees, being a bee taxonomist, and Silverleaf Phacelia is his number 1, and it is every number up to 10 as well. So Silverleaf Phacelia is your friend, and it's the friend of many, many, many bees as well, and that cute little ant. It has gray-green foliage, it's cool flower clusters that are kind of come out in a spiral and they unfurl. This plant literally will begin blooming in June and continue blooming right through until September. All right, that was number 9. Number 10, Silky Lupine. Silky Lupine, it's blooming right now, and it's got, again, a soft, kind of velvety texture to the leaves, beautiful light blue, light lavender flowers, and most importantly, because of this particular webinar, I have to mention this one. It is not the Russell lupin. This is also blooming all along our highway, especially thrums and terries into Castlegar. If you look a little bit higher up on those slopes, you will see the Silky Lupine. It's blooming as well. It's really important because Silky Lupine is important for pollinators. It's what they prefer, and they get the most nutritional value from the Silky Lupine, not the Russell lupin. The Russell lupin, if it continues to take over our roadsides at the expense of Silky Lupine, there are dire ecological consequences because of that. All right, okay, I can't count. 11, Western Canada Goldenrod. And I have a few more slides to get through, and then we will open it up for questions, just in case you're wondering. So maybe many of you don't think Western Goldenrod should be included. You think of it kind of weedy. You're like, oh, I'm not sure. But it's so, again, it's that late season bloomer. It blooms its heart out, and it's got these beautiful pyramid-shaped clusters of orange flowers. It is just absolutely brilliant. Big leafy stems, really, really important. But I wanted to include it as number 11 because our webinar is about invasive species in part, and I wanted to show a rare species of bee using spotted knapweed. And so we have spotted knapweed across the landscape, right? We don't have as much Western Canada Goldenrod or asters or Silverleaf Phacelias. If we are going to replace spotted knapweed with anything, do not replace it with grasses. The grasses do not support Western bumblebee. These wildflowers will. So be cognizant, be aware of what you replace your invasives with, and do it well. Do it well, do it right. All right, just a shout out. So here's Kinseed. This is our home space. So we keep collecting seed for sale. We've been selling lots of seed this spring. We'll continue, but remember, fall is a great time for seeding. So that is also probably the next time that we'll be getting lots of seed out there. Our nursery is thriving right now, as you can see, with plants for gardens and restoration sites available in the fall. And we're establishing demonstration gardens. Like here's something we talked about right here. The heuchera, what can I say? I do love it. Shrubby penstemon, we have some nodding onion, all occurring beautifully together in this little arrangement. And so demonstration gardens for you to come and see what these plants look like when they start getting established. And Janet, I know you're on here. Hey, Janet. So I wanted to profile your hedgerow. This is just awesome because Janet was not only a friend, but kind of our first client. And so we planted a hedgerow for her in spring 2018, and then she took this picture yesterday. This is what it looks like now. So there's just, in the first year we say, in ecological gardening, plants sleep, right? They're just getting settled. They're recovering from transplant shock. They're working on developing roots. They're kind of taking it, laying it low, taking it easy, trying to get reestablished. The second year, plants creep, right? So they're starting to get their footing, meaning get the roots. They're starting to grow and expand a bit. right? You're starting to see some above ground growth, right? They're responding to the local conditions. The third year, plants leap. That's what's happening this year. And so Janet, it's going to leap this year for sure. That's when they really take off. They really have a good root system, so they're really putting out their above ground growth. So that is, look at that beautiful hedgerow just taking off, and it's looking spectacular. All right, I just wanted to, 2 more slides and I'm done. Go back to Kootenay Native Plant Society. This is a project, Leah, I know you're out there too. Hi. We started this project last year with help from the Kootenay Lake Local Conservation Fund. Thank you very much. We got funding again this year. And we started to work with community members around Kootenay Lake, teaching them how to collect seed, where to collect seed, how to do it well, how to do it ethically. We built a wildflower seed library for the Kootenay Lake area. We worked with local people on seed identification, on plant identification, and we have 6 meadows in 5 different communities that were solarizing all summer long, and we were able to seed meadows. I don't know if you can see my cursor, seeding in fall. And then, of course, it comes with the celebration at the end. So I just wanted, that is a project that is continuing this year. We're super excited about it, about working with community, again, building community connections, and getting that project continuing on this year. And hopefully we're in year 2, so we're in the creek phase of just establishing a meadow. And final slide. So just, these are 3 projects with the Kootenay Native Plant Society that's happening now. KMPS information here, Kinseed information down here, and a shout out to our friends Gregoire at Spiral Farm Nursery, as well as Cam, a new nursery out at 6 Mile Thimble Hill Nursery. So there are native plant growers here. And yeah, let's just keep the community growing, so to speak, and keep those connections. And I and Valerie, thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Valerie, and thank you for thank you to all of our speakers. That was really helpful. So I will read out some of the questions that we have. One of them is, are there any non-invasive IVs that people could plant?
No.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, please distinguish, Anne said, can you please distinguish ecological gardening from permaculture?
So you could probably say permaculture is a form of ecological gardening, but not all ecological gardening is permaculture. Permaculture has, very specific procedures, techniques used. Ecological gardening, I think, is a more generic term that is about working with ecological processes.
Great, okay, thank you. Dar said, my property is overrun by thimbleberry bushes. Is there a native plant that I can plant to compete with it as I pull it out regularly?
Thimbleberry is native.
Ah.
So there you are.
Excellent. Okay, Madeline said, if you do have infill methods to make it better for native species or tolerant natives. If you do have infill methods to make it better for native species or tolerant natives. I don't particularly understand that question, but maybe you do.
Good. Yeah. So what Brenda was talking about was that our native soils they have life of their own that we don't see and don't know about, right? And so those are not obviously going to be in our infill soils. They're also not going to be in old pasture soils or things where we've been growing tomatoes. So that life will be lost. But often when we're growing native species, what we try to do is collect a tiny bit of the soil that's growing from them in the wild to add to the growing medium, or when we transplant, to help create those connections in the local area. So that's something that you can do, is take a little bit of the soil, the duff around a native plant in the wild. Don't take the plant, but you just take a little bit of the soil.
Cool. All right, thanks. And so Kelsey said, where would I acquire yarrow for transplant? I would love wild yarrow, and I agree. I'm also interested to know that.
So the question is where to get yarrow?
Yeah.
You can purchase yarrow seeds from Kinseed, or we've just plotted up a whole bunch of cute little yarrow babies. You saw a picture in the slideshow. So yeah, we will have yarrow for sale. You can get it from us.
And where is Kinseed?
Kinseed is based in Nelson.
Oh, cool. And like, so yeah, just research the address.
Yeah, so reach out to the email and we'll hook you up.
Awesome. Okay, Brad said, would harvesting seeds from wild plant patches be effective and sustainable means for restoring our native biodiversity?
Okay, so seed collection can be a really important way of conserving native plants. There are really specific guidelines and rules to follow. And one of those things is you have to 100% know that you can identify the plant. You have to only collect from a population that has hundreds of individuals. You can never collect more than 10% of the seed that's available on any given day. And then you have to absolutely know how to treat that seed to cure it properly or to get it prepared for planting or for storing. So it can be, but it's actually an entire, it's an entire science in and of itself.
Great. Okay, thanks. So Carol asked, she'd love some help establishing a native pollinator garden as a Rotary project within the city of Trail. Should I pass on? Carol, one of their emails is going to be in the follow-up email. Who should she contact?
She can contact me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue. So it's info@kinseed.ca, and I'll include that in the follow-up email, Carol. Nicole said, are there any good ant-repelling native species?
That's a good question. I have no idea.
Right. What about slug repelling?
Oh my God.
I've got so many slugs in the garden right now.
No, I mean, there are techniques to control slugs, but I don't think there are any. I'm not aware of any. Okay. There are probably some that are less palatable to slugs, but yeah,
they'll just find the delicious ones. And I'm currently drying some eggshells, so we'll see how that goes.
Good luck.
Lucy said, what kind of community involvement will be happening this year?
This COVID year? Yeah, so we've really had to scale back any of our group activities or volunteer activities. Maybe Lori can take on that from a CKISS point of view. And hopefully in the fall, we will be more open to doing some of that community involvement.
Or if it opens up later.
Or if it opens up, yeah.
Yeah, we are in the same boat.
Though I'm sure very much like CKISS, we're doing more online. Mm-hmm. And so one of our projects through CPT funded project is to try, and we'll figure out how to do this in the field, but it is to train people on iNaturalist, on Bumblebee Watch, on these apps. And so we might start with sort of a web-based tutorial sort of situation first, and then if we go into phase 3 or whatever of this crisis, then and it opens up a little bit more, then we can have more field-based training. But I'm sure, like Lori was saying, we're doing what we can. Please stay in touch with us through our websites.
Yeah, play it by ear. We now have a YouTube channel. The pandemic.
Perfect. Aileen said, are all willows okay?
I'm not sure about the context of the question, but I would say yes, except not all willows are native. So I tend to default to native willows. There's lots of non-native willows out there as well. Yeah,
Okay,
I don't know.
No, just look it up per willow, see if it's native, because not all willows are native.
Yes.
When can I collect arnica seeds on my lakeside cliff? Said John. Lakeside cliff. God, that sounds good.
You collect them when they're ripe.
Yeah,
so in the seed collection world, so we do what's called forecasting. So if you have a little population of arnica nearby, watch it, go out and visit it. And really, so when the first flower starts to open up, as like to lose its petals and open up its seeds, like they kind of do a dandelion-like thing, that's when the seed is ripe for collecting. So, and you have to learn your individual species, because there are a whole bunch of different arnica species. So, yeah, watch it, visit it. It's in the seed collection industry, it's called forecasting, and yeah, and get to know that individual species.
Okay. Andrea said, where can I read the Weed Control Act?
Laurie.
Hi. I just had to unmute It's on the bclaws.ca, or you can just look up the Weed Control Act if you Google it, and that shows up right there at the top. Or you can go on to bclaws.ca.
Okay.
Or info@CKISS.ca, and I can forward it to you.
Great. And the last question is from Jane, who said, can you please tell me the other early spring plants that were with willow? Oh, Jane, you'll get the recording, so you could just rewind it a little bit and you'll be able to see. If that's okay with you. Okay, that's all the questions. Thank you so much to all of our presenters. That was so wonderful. And we'll be able to send out everyone a recording of the webinar later.